You know, I remember when we went to counter-protest against the Z-zombies on 9th of May, there was this one individual who seemed to be a little bit more highbrow than most of the others. And when I told him that he was preaching revisionist history, he told me, oh no, revisionist history, that's a made-up term. To which I answered him, no, it's not. He asked me, what does it mean? Well, it's a very simple term. It means you don't use real history. You don't actually say what happened. You say what you want to have happen. Whatever would give you more legitimacy. That, my friends, is revisionist history. That is what the Russian terrorist regime has been involved in ever since their conception. And they will continue to be involved in it until they are stopped for good. Until finally the West understands who their enemy is. Until finally the West sees that Russia is not going to stop, even if they would be able to take over Ukraine. They will always want something more, something further. It is not in their nature to go for concessions. It is in their nature to betray the agreements they have made, to take the concessions of others, and then demand the double. But my friends, we must also not forget that Russia is weaker than it used to be. That is why now is the time in which we can finally put this great evil to an end. Put the Russian terrorist regime to an end. Putin does not have a monopoly on Russian support. When we came to the Russian embassy on the day of the election, the vast majority of the people there were not going to vote for Putin. And that's exactly why the Russians have closed their embassy before everyone would have the chance to vote. We spoke with the few pro-Putin supporters who were there, and they gave us nothing. Nothing except the propaganda that their hands were filled with. We asked them, why are you voting for Putin? They said, because we are voting for Putin. We asked them, but why is that? What's the reason? They said, because it is right. My friend, any person with the minutest amount of reason can understand that that's not a reasonable standpoint to have. Irrational and super emotional. They don't function with the truth. They function with what they want the truth to be, not with what is. And we must not forget about those people of the many countries who stood side by side with us. Those who fight shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainian heroes are heroes themselves. And that rule holds no exceptions. Whether the people who are helping the Ukrainians directly are from outside of Ukraine, from Moldova, from Belarus, and yes, even from Russia. Because those who have turned their back to Putin's terrorist regime and have decided to fight against it deserve our praise as much as any other hero who fights against Putin. Putin's terrorist regime needs to be brought down for good. And we will accept help from all over the world to do it. Ukraine is the first step for a new world, for a better world. A world in which the different countries will cooperate with each other. A world of nuclear demilitarization and not of nuclear saber rattling. A world without Putin. A world without the Russian terrorist regime. But to achieve that world, my friends, we need to be together. We need to work together. We need to know what's going on. We need to know our enemies. And we need to know our allies. Those who stand side by side with us. And those who stand against us. Even against all proof of the opposite. They do not care about that proof. They do not care about the evidence. The pro-Russian cause is a rotten cause to the very core. But of course, the Russian propaganda machine is still powerful. They know how to sell a product. They know how to make it appealing to those who are uninformed. But that, my friends, is what we are here for right now. For those who are not sure what's going on in Ukraine, for those who think it's a gray situation and not a black and white situation, we say no. It is the most black and white situation ever since World War II. My friends, it's time to see reality as it is. We are here to show it. We are here to have a productive debate with the people who might want to come here and question us. Because we have conviction. And those who stand against us, those Z zombies on 9th of May, they do have conviction. But the difference is, if we are questioned, if we are asked a question, even provocative questions, we can answer them. They cannot. They refuse to answer. You know what they did? They came to us with their little columns, and they tried to stick those columns in our faces, playing Game Победы as loudly as they could. And when I gently pulled one of those columns aside with a finger, the individual who was holding it started shouting, "Don't touch it! Don't touch it!" He was a very funny individual. He had written Yaruski on his t-shirt. Alas, the words he had on his t-shirt were more articulate than the words that came from his mouth. And that's a bad sign, very bad sign. When you have a lot of conviction for a certain cause, but at the minutest amount of scrutiny you collapse. Your bowels turn to water, and you cannot answer a single question. That, my friends, is when we have a problem. That is when you can clearly see that that ideology is not to be trusted. One of the main values of Great Britain, one of the most important British values, is freedom of expression. And that, my friends, is a privilege that we have, that every person who lives in this country has. That is a privilege that should be cherished by everyone who's here. Because not everyone in the world has this privilege. Do you really think if someone who lives in North Korea, that they can do the same that we can do here? Can they criticize their government? Can they say the minutest thing that goes against the agenda of their terrorist regime? No! Same exact thing works in Ayatollah Iran, the terrorist regime that's helping Russia. And of course, Russia is becoming more and more like it used to be in the Soviet Union. The Russian terrorist regime has created a post-truth society. However, now they're trying to switch it back to the old ways, to the Soviet ways. And instead of a post-truth society of depoliticized people, they want to create an alternate reality with politicized people. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to do at all, but that's what they're trying to do. As for the West, the Russian terrorist regime is using every single bit of resources that they have to try their best to subvert the West, to try to make sure that the West does not realize what's going on and how the existence of the Westerners is under threat right now and always. They're trying to do their best to misguide people, to confuse people. And that is why it's so important that in this era of information, which also happens to be an era of disinformation, that we do our research, that we look at things with cold eyes, and we understand what's going on. We don't allow our emotions to get in the way. Emotions are something human. It's something that makes every single one of us. But we must not allow them to guide us. We must see reality. And that is what our opposition never sees. Because our opposition continuously insists in things that are ridiculous, that are self-contradictory. The Russian terrorist regime's propaganda machine claims that the Ukrainians are at the same time Nazis and a Zionist cabal. Now my friends, how does that work? How can you be a Zionist and a Nazi at the same time? The two things are contradictory. They don't work together. One of them is hatred of Jews, the other one is for the Jews. How does that work? It's impossible. But the Russian terrorist regime is not trying to make up believable excuses. or believable conspiracy theories. No, they're trying to speak to the fringes, to the extremes, to the far right and to the far left. That's all they can do. They know that any reasonable person, any person in the center of the political spectrum will never listen to them. They know that their ideology makes no sense, but they don't care. They know that they are lying, but they don't care. They never care. It's time to stop this nonsense idea that the Russian terrorist regime is a reasonable entity that we can negotiate with. Absolute nonsense. They have been trying to spread these lies ever since the beginning of this war. In fact, even before the war they have with us, they had other wars, like with Georgia. When they invaded Georgia in 2008, they claimed almost exactly the same thing about the Georgians. Oh, the Georgian Nazis. Oh, they're planning to invade big Russia. Nonsense. The Georgians were never doing anything against them. They were invaded because the Russians felt like they could get away with it. That was the real reason. That is the real reason why they invaded Ukraine. And for the people who are afraid of sending aid to Ukraine because of nuclear escalation, for those people, we have a very simple message. My friends, Russia is afraid of NATO. Russia is afraid of the West. That's exactly why it should be very clear that the West and NATO are the better players in this game. They are the entities we should side with, because those are the entities that the terrorists are afraid of. It's very simple. If Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania were not part of NATO, they would have been invaded long ago by the Russian terrorist regime. They invaded Ukraine because Ukraine was not yet part of NATO. They invaded Georgia because Georgia was not yet part of NATO. And these idiotic conversations that, oh no, evil NATO is surrounding Russia, they are the absolute stupidest and most lowbrow argument anyone can ever make in this situation. NATO is a voluntary organization. When a country does not want to join it, it does not join it. Why is it that the opinion of the Russian terrorist regime counts more than the opinions of the sovereign countries in Europe who want to join NATO? Why is it that we should have special treatment for Russia? Because they don't want equality. They never wanted equality. No, they wanted special treatment. If they wanted equality, then Russia would have the same claim over Ukraine that Ukraine has over Russia. That is equality, my friends. They never wanted it.